Hello and welcome back to Transport Fever 2, the UK modded series for episode 200, which means I've been doing this for nearly or over 4 years. Thank you very much for joining me in today's video. And before recording this video, I thought to myself, what should I do for episode 200? This is, in a sense, it is a milestone episode. 200 episodes is nothing to sniff at. But also, I am going to be going until maybe episode 230, 240, perhaps even 250. So there is still a substantial amount, 1/5 of the series left to go. And I thought, should I just continue as normal or should I not? Well, we are starting over Shepton Mallet today, not because I'm going to be doing some work in Shepton Mallet. No, I decided not to continue as normal. In fact, this is probably going to be the only time you see Shepton Mallet in this entire video, or at least being the focus of any part of the video. You might see it in the background here and there, depending on what I show. The goal of today's video, or the main agenda of today's video, is going to be to go around every single town, plus the 2 marshalling yards, and talk a little bit about them, talk about any plans I have for them for the last 5th of this series, and then cut the voiceover out and just go into some train spotting, where you can just enjoy the trains toing and froing in and around areas of the town. So maybe the junctions, the stations, certainly, from a few different angles, seeing what I can potentially show. We'll start up in the northwest of the map, which is where Bracknell is. That is where the series started, and I shall make my way all the way down and around the map, probably ending either around Sudbury, which is the southeast of the map, or depending on the route I take, I might end up around Maryport or Ollerton, that sort of an area. So make sure you stay tuned. Let's get started. As I said, Shepton Mallet is currently out of the picture. After the intro, we shall be over in Bracknell. Let's talk a little bit about it, and hopefully you enjoy just watching the trains for once. Normally, this is only something that I show for maybe a minute or so. This time, it is going to be a significant amount of this video. Well, as I said, we were going to be starting off in Bracknell, so here we are, hovering above, going around Bracknell. Bracknell was one of the first connected cities on this map, so episode 1, 2, 3, somewhere around there. Now has a terminus with 3 lines going into it, but not the original station. In fact, the original station is just over to the side of it. That station still exists, as well as the odd loop that I made, of which just some of the bridge still stands. There is a goods yard here now and a depot. The goods yard is next to the old station, so it uses some of the line, and then the depot is next to the goods yard. So it is a little cramped up. The inspiration for this was a little bit of King's Cross, but not so much. I wanted to keep things a little bit more split, plus I was still learning how to play stations and how to try and make this as realistic as possible. The town itself needs expanding probably down the hill to the north, and maybe up to the forest edges going over to the west, but I'm not entirely certain what I'm going to do there. Certainly we could expand it down the hill going southwest as well. What I do want to do is avoid it going into the dark green area where it currently, a little bit of it has, but I'm probably going to cut that back and turn that back into fields or something akin to that. Anyway, I suppose that was Bracknell. Enjoy some of the train spotting in and around this area. Next up will be Attleborough. Attleborough, or as I incorrectly pronounced it for a little while. I have no idea why. I thought there was a dash in between the words, and I pronounced it as Attleborough, as if it was like Chesterley Street or something along those lines, which was a little silly. But yes, I pronounced it incorrectly for a while. This was a small town that more recently I decided should probably have a fairly large upgrade. So I went ahead and upgraded it very, very slowly. It is expanding into that upgraded area, which is sort of to the northwest of it and a little bit to the west. It is moving into that area, which is really good. That is promising. It shows that this town is growing and there is a demand in this town and things are being supplied to this town, which is great. Because if it wasn't, that would be a problem and nothing would grow, and I would have probably wasted a whole bunch of time. The station over here is the original station, but it has been upgraded, and also I attached a goods yard to this, and this was more like the King's Cross goods yard, where everything is connected together, and just over to one side there's a spur with all the goods yards, but obviously it is a little bit, I'd say, condensed, because it has far less lines all the way through. Not just the passenger station, but the goods yard as well. I think I'm going to be expanding this with more lines, some more trains coming in and out, hence the upgraded station. May even end up some sort of a main line, but I'm not entirely certain where I will be running that to. So yes, that is Attleborough. Continuing down the line from Attleborough, we head into Barnstaple. Now, Barnstaple is the one that I created the last on-camera goods yard on, or in. And there were a few problems around the side, and I still have not quite figured out what to do between the viaduct and the embankment for the goods yard. It looks a little bit awkward, and I'm not all too keen on it. If you have any ideas, please do leave comments. The station itself needs a bit of a rework because it was created 150, 160 episodes ago, if not more, and back then there were far less mods available. So things did not look quite as good in terms of maybe some of the models, some of the buildings that I could use, simply because there was no way of using them. Those mods that we have now did not exist. Town expansion would be interesting. I've done a little bit over to the west of it, but I'm not sure how much more town expansion I could do. Realistically, I could attempt to do an expansion across the river. That would be interesting. And one of the other interesting things that I could look at is perhaps making a sawmill in Barnstaple, because in the real life Barnstaple, there was a sawmill there, I believe, a long time ago. That has long gone, but I do believe there was a sawmill in the real life Barnstaple. So I could do something with a sawmill over here. Barnstaple in real life, by the way, is in... where is it? Devon? I think it would be... Yes, it would be classed as Devon. Yes, so northwest Devon is where Barnstaple is, roughly. I'm not entirely certain where exactly the county borders are for that going into Cornwall, but I'm fairly sure it's in Devon. Call it North Devon. So yes, that is Barnstaple. Still plenty of roads to be upgraded. I think the roads that I've put in to the west of the railway are working pretty well. It's just a matter of choosing where I put the next roads. Across the river, or further out to the north and the west, and perhaps a little bit to the south as well, continuing with the theme of housing just along the riverbank. Moving along to West Bromwich, or West Brom, and this town has been a little neglected since the goods yard was built, which was once part of a depot here. So I think that West Bromwich is going to need a little bit of time where I sit there and rework a lot of the roads and expand the town quite significantly. I think the station is probably large enough. This is a branch line at the end of the day, so two platforms, 2-track is perfectly fine. In fact, the only reason it is 2-track is because despite being a branch line, the circular rail network goes both clockwise and anti-clockwise around this, and I really did not want them running into each other and getting clogged, as well as the goods line, and I could probably run another line through here if I really wanted to do so, but it would mean I need to work on a junction where this connects up to the Attleborough Barnstaple Railway, and so that would require a little bit of rework there. I might do that at some point as well, but the main focus in West Brom is going to be reworking the roads and expanding the town as a whole. The railway is a little twisty as well, just in points, and a little bit bumpy, so that might be something I also look into once I get that going. Continuing over to Carnforth, which is just south of Bracknell. Maybe I should have gone here straight after Bracknell, but I did not. This is home to one of the 2 food factories that are currently on the map. This was, I think, the first proper factory setup that I built, and it still runs to this day, although it is far from optimized. And one of the issues I have with this is that there is no efficient way. There is a way, but there is no efficient way of connecting the food factory, the food processing plant, to the marshalling yard, the northwest marshalling yard. So if I want this to become more productive and more useful, I'm going to have to find a way to do that. And at present, I do not know how I'm going to pull that off. I could shut it down, of course, and do something else somewhere else, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Carnforth itself is a pretty tightly packed city. If you have a look at it, it is very, very tightly packed in places. Really, no place to expand or to really do anything with the railway. I'm going to have to demolish parts of Carnforth, which is not particularly desirable. So I'm probably looking at not expanding that railway any further, and that station is going to be as large as it gets for the next few decades. I'll have to see. The city itself, though, can be expanded both, in fact, in all directions, north, east, south, and west. So I might look at doing that. Some of the areas that I expanded on camera are almost full, which is really promising. And of course, we do have freights running to this, and there are plenty of passengers waiting at the platform, which is something I will have to optimize at some point. Now, speaking of food factories, if we go down to Macclesfield, this one is a little bit interesting because I have an option to build a completely separate food factory here, which I would then be able to connect to the marshalling yard very easily, shutting down the Carnforth one. I can get railways to bring food in over to Macclesfield, and I can get, as I said, the food out over to the marshalling yard, or even directly to Carnforth and Bracknell very, very easily. You might be wondering, well, why would I do that? Why move the food factory from one city up to here? Well, interestingly enough, Macclesfield in real life, which is in Cheshire, it's south of Manchester, but I'm fairly sure it's in Cheshire. It's either south, it's in the south east corner of Cheshire, or it's in the right at the top of Staffordshire. One or the other. I'm fairly sure Macclesfield is in Cheshire, though. So yes, anyway, I'm getting distracted. Macclesfield, a couple of interesting things about it. In the real world, there is a forest to the east of it, just like in Transport Fever 2, this particular series. And yes, I made that forest. No, I did not particularly know that that forest was something that Macclesfield had directly to the east of it. I knew there was a forest around it, didn't know it was directly to the east, and so we could put a sawmill here. This is actually quite realistic. The other thing I could do is put the food factory here, because Macclesfield is where Hovis bread used to be made. And so it would make perfect sense to have wheat coming to Macclesfield to make bread, which is being sent across the map. If you think that is a good idea, please leave a comment in the comments box. Please leave a comment telling me, yes, you want that, and I will go ahead and get on with it. Aside from that, Macclesfield does have the opportunity to expand in perhaps a bit more of a limited fashion. It really cannot go too much further to the west, and because of Macclesfield Forest to the east, it cannot go too much further to the east. So really the expansion is limited to the north and the west. The station itself, the passenger station, should again stay the same size. It depends on what I choose to do with the food processing plant. And of course, I have the little sidings that double up as the goods yards. They are the goods yards, and that seems to be working fairly nicely as well. Macclesfield also has that interesting approach from the south, which started off as a 2-track approach and has now become a really odd 4-track to 6-track to 2-track approach. I'm not entirely certain it works the way I intended, but there we go. That is what it is, and so that is what I'm stuck with. down to Early, and yes, I now know it is pronounced Early. I had no idea Early was in Berkshire, and I've driven through it before. And I had no idea, I just thought it was just a part of Reading. I never really paid attention. But it is not. It is separate from Reading. It is Early. I think it comes under the same council, but it is, yes, it is around the Reading area. Funnily enough, it is not that far from Bracknell. Bracknell is very nearby to Early. So, yes, Carnforth and Macclesfield are nowhere near it. Carnforth and Macclesfield are not incredibly far from each other, actually. But Early and Bracknell are very, very close to each other. So this was a town I mispronounced for about 150 plus episodes. I have recently expanded it with the new goods line. That's the station I'm talking about. The town, of course, has also been expanded. As you can see, I've done a lot of work off camera, which is another reason why I'm doing this episode. There has been a lot of work that I've done off camera in a number of places, some that I will not be showing you, but as time comes along, or as the time appears and as the video progresses, or different videos, different episodes progress, maybe we'll come across a few of those changes that I've made. But a lot of things have been done off camera. The most significant of them will be shown. I think all of the most significant ones will be shown in today's video, and the expansion over here in Early is one of them. But getting back to the station itself, the new goods pass-through line is active. It works, and you will see that in a moment that it does work. However, I would have preferred 2 lines going through there, but I was unable to do so just because of space constraints. So unfortunately, it is just the single line. It still manages to do the job. I think if I have to expand the station again, which I might have to, given that this is a major transfer station, it is going to need demolition of the road to the road to the east of it is going to need to be completely demolished, which means that all the houses in that area are going to be demolished, as is the bus station. So that is something to bear in mind. Now, Early. I said Early. No, it's Early. Early has a complex approach from both sides, but surprisingly, I find that this approach works. The goods yard itself used to be which is on the north side of the approach, or north side of Early. The goods yard used to be a depot, and that has been converted to a goods yard, although the depot part of it does still exist. So that is certainly still there, but the main goal of this now is a goods yard with some sidings. A lot of the goods trains in this area pass through Early, which is why I had to do the line through the middle of the station, and you will definitely be seeing them. But yes, I think future rework of Early Station is going to be a problem. But in terms of town expansion, there is plenty of space for Early to expand, and I think it is going to be able to expand very, very nicely over the next few episodes. I think that this particular town is going to be expanding very, very rapidly. time for a break from the towns, and we are in between two towns at the moment with the Northwest Marshalling Yard, and this is the first marshalling yard that I have ever built, so it wasn't the greatest, but I have done a number of updates to it over the episodes, trying to neaten it up, improve it, and make it a lot more functional. That being said, it was designed with the future in mind to start with, so until about the 1980s, I'm expecting this to need minimal changes. Hopefully. I'm not entirely certain, but that is the plan. All goods trains that are servicing the north of the map and the west of the map pick up goods over here. Northwest, perhaps some of the northeast as well, I believe, is handled from this particular yard. Effectively, all of the north. They all have goods being picked up from this particular yard. All the large trains that are coming here come in from other yards or from directly from factories, as the case may be. And some of the points, as I mentioned, are a little bit messy. They are going to need a little bit of rework. I will probably end up doing that off camera. And as well as being a marshalling yard, it does serve as and double as a depot and some sidings. just southeast of the marshalling yard, and probably soon going to be coming up right against the marshalling yard, is West Mersey. Now, West Mersey is the only town on this particular map that has 2 passenger stations running through it and 2 completely separate lines. The main passenger station has high-speed pass-through lines, which I can also double up as platforms if needed, but at the moment it does not need to be a platform. The old station in this, so the old, or should I say the old station approach, it wasn't the old station. That is still the original station, the main station in West Mersey. That is not the second one. The main station, when it was expanded to keep the speed up, the railway had to be reworked. So there is a spur, which is where the old station was. And I repurposed that spur to become a goods yard. And I thought that was a pretty good use of it. I find that the railways in this entire area are quite elegant. The transfer between lines seems to work. The little station that is in a cutting also works. That's like a branch line station. That one comes all the way from Attleborough, if needed. So that is where the Attleborough line comes in. And of course, the circular route also goes around on part of that line, but does not go into or up to the station in the cutting. So there we go. One part of this route is, or one part of this setup is not elegant, and that is the approach into the goods yard. It just does not quite work the way I want it to work, so I might need to do a little bit of rework there. But the rest of the city is pretty elegant. It is large, it has plenty of room for expansion, and it is the city where I have built the most custom placed houses. And the reason I do not keep doing this is because A, it takes a lot of time, and B, for some reason, the computer seems to, in some cases, build atop those houses. So it completely ruins the aesthetic anyway. If I can find a way around that and I have time, I will certainly be going around doing more of that in more towns. But for now, it is just West Mersey that has the majority of them. Now, if we continue along the branch line going down from West Mersey, so past that station that was in the cutting, we arrive at Lichfield. Now, in the real world, Lichfield, which is in Staffordshire, I'm not sure there is really much to do about it. There really isn't much. There is a nice cathedral there with 3 spires. It's pretty old. It has some town walls. There are Roman encampments or old ruins nearby, Roman settlements nearby. I think Lichfield was part of it. But aside from that, I know very little about Lichfield itself, which tells you that I'm not from Lichfield. So this is Lichfield. I have done some upgrades in Lichfield. It is a small but growing town. I have put some pass-through lines in the station, which I had planned and started but never actually put in. Now, on the south side, it is fine. On the north side, I'm not particularly keen on it, because it sort of looks like the track goes from 2-track to 4-track to 2-track to 4-track, and that is a little awkward. But for now, I'm going to leave it as it is and see what happens. It is currently serviced by 2 passenger branch lines, one which terminates here, one which continues on further south to New Romney, and it has 1 goods line that services it, which you can see the goods station being right near the passenger station. Now, what I want to do here in Lichfield is I want to make this the home of iron and steel works. And the reason for that is that I have easy access to coal from the marshalling yard, the Northwest Marshalling Yard. And just south of this, there is an iron ore mine. So I think that will be a really good idea. However, that is going to require a lot of work to make that functional. I'm not entirely certain how I'm going to do it. I know where, and if you're looking at the pictures right now, you will probably be able to figure out where I'm planning to put that particular factory. But I'm not entirely certain if I can pull it off very easily and whether it will look elegant. And let's be honest, one of the most important things about railways is that they must all look elegant. At the current terminus of this particular branch line is New Romney. Now, New Romney is a very small village in Kent, not too far from Dover. So, yes, I suppose it makes sense that New Romney is near a river, even though really it'd be not too far from the channel. That is New Romney, isn't it, that I'm thinking of? I'm fairly sure that's New Romney in Kent. And realistically, I don't see much happening here. There isn't much to say about it. I did expand the station a long time ago to cope with larger trains, but I've not really put that plan into action. So maybe I should do a little bit of focus in New Romney and see what I can do. There is an active goods yard, which is great. So that is functional. Apart from that, there really isn't much to talk about. It is a small town with barely anything happening yet. Now, speaking of small towns, let's go up and across to the east. I suppose this is not really the middle of the map. It's still partially north, slightly north, and east, right up against the map boundary, and we arrive at Bentham. Bentham, which is in Lancashire, is a tiny village on a railway. Steam railway, I think goes towards Settle, which is obviously there's a famous railway, Settle to Carlisle. But yeah, that is really all there is. This is also a branch line terminus, which is where I suppose I could run a train all the way from New Romney to Bentham if I wanted to. This would be the other terminus of the branch line. This is another small town with very little currently planned. If you have any ideas, please do let me know. But otherwise, this is going to remain a small town with very little planned. There isn't much else to say about it. Directly south of Bentham, but quite a distance away, is Alford. Now, Alford is a slightly larger town, but again, it is very close to the border of the map. I would call this a quarry town, a mining town, because it is close to 3 quarries. 2 are in its immediate vicinity, and 1 is a little further off. So I guess this is very much a mining town of sorts. I might try to expand the town to bring it closer to the quarries, although there is a limit to how far I can expand it to the south, simply because I have a plan with a woodland. But I could certainly expand it over to the northwest, right up to the quarry, and perhaps even beyond, although I think it will struggle, and I can expand it north to the forest. East, I'm going to perhaps try not to expand it. I need to do something to block the border out. So there is some expansion possible, but again, this is another small town, and not all of the towns are going to be mega cities. This is not too far from Berwick-upon-Tweed, or just Berwick, as I suppose I should call it. So a road connection to Berwick is active. I'm not sure if that many people use it, but there is also a railway going there, which I think people do much prefer. But that is really about it with Alford. As I mentioned Berwick, might as well do Berwick next. So Berwick is not quite upon Tweed. If we are calling the river nearest to it Tweed, this is Berwick near Tweed. Now, in real life, Berwick is on the coast. Right up, it is on Tweed, the river Tweed, and it is right up, I think, less than 2 miles or just over 2 miles from the Scottish border. So this is a very interesting town historically in real life, but unfortunately I do not have town walls or any of that kind of stuff, or castles or any of that actually in this version of Berwick. This version of Berwick is on a hill, which is odd. Berwick is my capital city. sort of. There is a major transfer station, which has a really nice roof. I think it might be one of the only stations with a roof like this, if not the only station with a roof like this. I'm not entirely certain. The station has expanded 3 times, and it is working quite well. But just like early, this is a major transfer station. The old gasworks here had a platform, but that was causing problems with the railway, with the passenger traffic. So I shut that down and moved all the goods yard and all the gasworks and everything over to a new location on the west side of the city, with some depots as well, which looks so much better. The brickworks to the north of the city are active. Those are active brickworks. I have added a little bit more to them, so they are a lot busier than they used to be. There are coal mines nearby which are being used and actually fed directly into the Midlands Marshalling Yard, or the Berwick Marshalling Yard, depending on what you want to call it. And I have tried to expand this quite significantly off camera, but there is still a lot more that needs to be done. So yes, that is Berwick, and we will probably be looking in and around this area of Trainspotting for a little while. In fact, before I do Trainspotting, why not talk about Berwick's Marshalling Yard, because this is really quite close to Berwick. Now, this was originally Berwick's goods yard, and it was taking in originally it was just taking in food from the Weetabix factory, which is on the island where Shepton Mallet is. But it has been upgraded and changed, expanded into a goods yard. And I do think it is a very, very well-designed goods yard. And I do think it runs really well while still maintaining part of its original goods yard function. I've been saying goods yard, I meant marshalling yard. It's been expanded into a marshalling yard, which retains some of its original goods yard functionality. So that is really nice. And really, the only reason that's happened is because I didn't know how to do that with the one near West Mersey, but I figured it out for this one over here. So this handles all the goods traffic into the Midlands area of the map, with a number of complex connections on both sides for minimal disruption to the main line. So we have bridges, we have massive splits, lots of lines coming in and out. Unfortunately, I'm sure the main line, which is only 2-track in this area, maybe I should upgrade that to 4 at some point, is probably still going to have some sort of an issue at some point, but I do try to ensure that it is absolutely minimal. Now, I think we should do some train spotting within the Berwick. Should we call it the Greater Berwick area? Now, if we continue down the main line from Berwick upon Tweed, not too far again from the marshalling yard, we come across Downham Market. Downham Market is closer to the Tweed, so perhaps I should call it Downham upon Tweed. No, that doesn't sound quite right, does it? But yes, Downham Market, which I've expanded off camera quite significantly in the northwest side of Downham Market, and almost all of it is already full, which just shows how busy Downham Market is and how much it is currently growing. It is actually growing very, very rapidly. It has a goods factory with its own line. That used to be the goods yard as well, but now it is just a goods factory, which takes planks in from the sawmill in Croydon. And I think I could probably expand Downham Market not only down to the river, but I could probably expand it past that factory and all around that factory, given that the railways go into tunnels. I think it might look very, very nice. I'll have to consider that. If you think that's a good idea, please do let me know, and I think I'll try that. I will definitely try that. The new goods yard in Downham Market is much closer to the main line. It does not have to travel a longer distance, and also it is, I think, probably more realistic to what a goods yard should be. down to Croydon, where the sawmill is. And Croydon is interesting because I thought it would be a good idea to build a pass-through station where there are only 2 platforms, and we have two railway lines going straight through the middle, which sort of hinders my ability to upgrade the station to 4 platforms, which is a problem. On top of that, because it was all straight, I tried to make the track as straight as possible. If I were to upgrade it, I would need to rework a whole bunch of roads on the east side of the station and probably rework the entire approach. So I think this is going to stay the way it is. The really weird thing about it is it has a massive platform on both sides, far bigger than it needs to be, and I probably will end up I'm going to end up shrinking those platforms down because I think they are far too large for what I now have planned, unless Croydon decides that it wants to grow. Because as I have placed a whole bunch of roads and put the infrastructure in with buses, nobody seems to really want to be moving on the opposite side, which is a bit annoying, given that I put all that effort in. So I've not bothered expanding this any further. Apart from that, there really isn't much else to say about Croydon. It has some nice railway bridges. It has the sawmill with a really strange depot, and that is about it. The goods yard that was here has been here for a while, and all I did was upgrade it to a more realistic goods yard. And there was really nothing else to say about Croydon. Further down the main line, we come across Batley. Now, Batley was, or is, an interesting setup. The way I've put the roads are a little bit too square for my liking in places, so I'm going to have to make some adjustments there. It does seem a little square, so I'm not entirely keen on that. The goods station, or the goods yard in Batley, in the centre, goes straight into the heart of Batley, which is really quite, I do quite like that. I think it works very well. And on top of that, it has a bridge going over it. So the railway does not get in the way of any road traffic, and the road does not get in the way of the railways. Not that you really can. Speaking of not getting in the way of railways, the other really nice thing about Batley is we have the bridge. So if we are coming in from the north, we have the viaduct, which then goes into an embankment, which the main road tunnels underneath, so no interference there. That embankment then turns into a small bridge over another road, which looks brilliant, which then goes straight into the station, and the station then goes straight into a small tunnel with the road going over the top of it, which again works really well, a bit of a cutting, and then into a much larger tunnel. This is probably the single best designed approach I have done on this main line that is not a terminus. I do think that this is a brilliant approach, and it just keeps all the main roads out the way whilst looking realistic and working extremely well. So yes, whilst I may not like the square design in parts of Batley, the railway is something I most certainly cannot complain about. All the way down now to Stratford, not upon Avon. There is no river nearby. There is no Avon. Shakespeare was not born here. This is not Shakespeare's birthplace. This is not Shakespeare's hometown. This is just Stratford. Stratford in Transport Fever 2 and my UK modded series. It used to be part of a different network though. So that is why the station looks completely different. It is not in the usual style. In fact, it is in the Great Western style. The next, how many stations? The next few stations that we go through, the next few towns we go through will all have Great Western style stations because it used to be part of a different network, which was built separately to the network in the Midlands and the North. And then I connected it all up with that massive viaduct that is north of Stratford. But I'm going to stop calling it Upon Avon. I say I'm going to stop calling it Upon Avon. I probably am still going to call it Upon Avon, but I will certainly try not to. The goods yard over here has been commissioned recently, so it does look pretty nice. I had an option of either bringing it down and up to or down to the level of the road, or flattening it to match the level of the station. And I decided to flatten it to match the level of the station. And honestly, I think it looks better. I think it looks much better for it. Definitely much better for it. So, yes, that is Stratford. It should become a large city. I'm not entirely certain when. Perhaps when I have goods running to it properly. But that is the plan. So let's find out if that plan actually comes into fruition. Depends on whether my computer can handle it. I think I have 25,000 population currently on this map. So whether my computer can handle it, and more so whether or not the computer, the game code, allows Stratford to actually expand to that particular size. Going up to Bridgenorth, I'm not going to spend much time over here. This is a small town, and this is probably going to remain a small town unless I come up with a really, really good idea. There is some flat land nearby, just north of it. I could potentially try and put a tools factory or something in there. I'm not entirely certain what to do with Bridgenorth. So if you have any ideas, please do let me know. But yes, Bridgenorth is not going to, there isn't much going on. And similarly, Chagford is in a similar boat. So we do have the river going through it. Maybe I should have put a river like that going through Stratford and called it the Avon. That would have been smart. I only just thought of that now. Well done, me. Anyway, Chagford. Yes, another small town, not really much planned. It also has some areas where there is flat ground. I could potentially... This might be a better area to build a factory in. So maybe one or the other, Bridgenorth or Chagford, will probably get a factory. But I'm not sure which, and I'm not sure what the factory will be. Tools, refinery, oil, power? No, that doesn't make sense. I think perhaps tools. Tools would be a good one. The interesting thing about Chagford, though, is its goods yard. I managed to do something a little fancy with the goods yard, but aside from that, small town, nothing really going on. Kingsbridge is another one of those great Western Railway towns that was originally made. So the original four were Stratford, Kingsbridge, Taunton and Sudbury, and we're going to do Kingsbridge now, then go Taunton and Sudbury. Kingsbridge is interesting for a couple of reasons. It has been expanded a little over the years, but two things really stand out to me in Kingsbridge. That one, that needs to be sorted, and the second, that is just a little interesting. The one thing that needs to be sorted is that there are houses on the opposite side of the railway station. Now you might be thinking, well, that's fine. It is, but there is only one tunnel that gets you to those houses. So if I want to expand if I want to expand Kingsbridge on that side, on the north side, or the northwest side, I'm not going to be able to with a single tunnel. I'm going to have to do some serious rework of the roads to try and get this working. Maybe it might be a better idea just to keep it all south of the railway. That might just be a good idea. Just leave that little bit north and leave the roads active. The thing that I do not need to really worry about or change is I don't know what to call this, the T-junction that is just west of Kingsbridge, which is now much more than a T-junction. So there is the depot, which had a goods yard connected to it, which is no longer used. So you have the depot, the goods yard, you have the new goods yard, which is working very, very nicely. It looks the part, and I think that is a perfect location for the goods yard, for a goods yard. And then you have the massive T, which starts on the opposite side, where you have a tunnel and two elevated areas, and the tunnel goes underneath, so it stops because the main line, it stops any trains that need to go across will not get in the way of any other trains that need to go across in the opposite direction. So that is why I made it like that. It looks quite unique. In fact, it is a unique feature on the map. And then it flies over to the other side of the goods yard, the depot, where one part of that line does go into a tunnel again to not interfere with what would have been the Western Main Line, or the Western Branch Line, whatever you want to call it. So this is a very interesting junction. I think it works really well. I have not yet had a single issue with it. And yes, I think that was one of my nicer feats of engineering. There will probably be a marshalling yard placed somewhere nearby to here, but I'm not entirely certain where. And the reason for that is because it's a bit hilly. This area is a bit hilly, and I'm just not certain what the best location is going to be for a flat marshalling yard of the size that I need. But there we go. That is Kingsbridge, and really, as I said, there's more interest on the junction to the to the east of it, than there is in Kingsbridge itself. If we head west to the bottom left of the map, so the southwest corner of the map, we come across Taunton, which is actually in the southwest of England as well. So it's a good place for it. In fact, I think Kingsbridge might be in this area too. As is Chagford. I think Chagford might be around this area. I'm not entirely certain actually, though those are smaller places. I'm fairly sure those Bridgnorth is definitely somewhere around this area. It's all in this Exeter, Devon sort of area. That is where a lot of these places are. So yes, anyway, Taunton. This is the terminus of the partial branch line, and it might end up being a terminus of a second main line, which is why I have expanded it the way I have. It will grow up to the forest edge, where I have placed a whole bunch of roads, but it is taking its time, and I think I am going to expand it a little further out to the west and to the north and northwest. Sorry, east and north and northeast. I'm looking at this the wrong way whilst I am recording and doing this voiceover. Speaking of going out to the west, I think I probably am not going to have it go out to the west, simply because of the fact that it is the edge of the map. There is, if I expand this to a mainline station and a mainline terminus, it probably is going to need a little bit of a better approach. But for now, this will do. And of course, there is a really nice little goods yard tucked into the side of it. I have given the station room, though, to expand for another 2 platforms if it should need it. In fact, I think I could probably put 2 platforms on one side. I could probably put another platform on the other side. So there is plenty of room if the station needs it. The one good thing about this station is it's the first station I actually decided to detail outside the station, and found out that it works, and works really quite nicely. So yes, that is Taunton. Zipping across the map, and we end up with Sudbury, which is in the southeast, which actually might be where the real Sudbury is as well. I've just realised that some of these things are actually in realistic locations to each other. I've just had a thought about how close Cornforth and Bentham are in real life, and I think the two of them might actually be a similar distance in game as they are in real life. Just a few miles. Interesting. Anyway, stop being distracted. Sudbury is a mainline terminus, hence the size of the station. There is a very complicated approach. I say very complicated approach. Actually, it's a simple approach with a very, very steep element, a very steep gradient coming in from the main line that comes in from Stratford. In fact, I'm actually considering putting some banking engines on this bit, because in the real world, I think the steepest approach in the UK is slightly steeper than this, and this is the Farringdon approach in London. I think banking engines are going to be needed, because I think banking engines were needed then as well. So yes, there is that. On the other side, the approach is just over a bridge, embankment, and just turns into the station, which is great. The old station, which was right next to this main station, is now a depot. We just have an engine shed there, which is where the old station was. And then, of course, next to the station is a massive goods yard and depot, which does look pretty, I think that does look really pretty neat. It's a really fancy setup, and it was surprisingly easy to pull off. I actually managed to use part of the old line into the old station to run the freight lines, and then just ran a tunnel underneath the new railway, and it just worked, which was surprising to me when I built it, but there we go. I have done some building of roads around Sudbury. It is taking a while to expand, but it is slowly expanding, which is great. And there are a number of passing lines here and there for allowing the trains to move in and out in the most efficient manner, and also allow them to change rail network entirely. So going from one line all the way over to the old Western Main Line from wherever this one goes. I think this one comes in from, what's the next town on there? Shepshed, which we will be visiting in a few moments. So yes, that is Sudbury. Nice little town. I think it's going to get very busy in a few episodes' time. Shepshed, which, yes, does mean sheep shed, is the town that I have done a lot of work off camera on. And as you can see very, very obviously, not only has the town been expanded slightly in sort of in the northwest corner, but there is a new freight station, new goods yard. That's the word I was looking for. There is a new goods yard in Shepshed, which is actually, the reason it's there is because I forgot. I forgot that Shepshed existed, and when I said last episode it was the final goods yard that I was making, I then went around the map and went, oh bother, Shepshed still does not have a goods yard. I better get to work on that. So I did. And whilst I was doing it, I thought to myself, you know what? Let me try and build a factory here. And that is exactly what I have done. This is a machine factory. And so this is part of what I created off camera, which is going to be a template, sort of a template, for perhaps any other factory that I build. Now, granted, I do have the brickworks. I do also have the Weetabix factory. I do also have the standard food processing plant in Carnforth. Now, the food processing plant in Carnforth, I think that does not count. The Weetabix factory, not too bad, but could be better. The brickworks could also be somewhat better, but this really looks the part, in my opinion. This really does look right. The problem is, I've made it so that it requires fuel, which should not be a problem. Planks, which should not be a problem. And tools, which is going to be a problem. Which is why I'm considering making a tools factory somewhere, and I really need to think about what I'm going to do with that, and where I'm going to get those tools from, where they need to go, and the marshalling yard and the placement for the marshalling yard, so on and so forth. Apart from that, I think Shepshed is still as it was. Really nice viaduct, a long viaduct coming into the station, directly into the station, and the station then on the opposite side goes into a tunnel very nicely. Everything staying very, very flat, and it just works. It really does work, and I think that this town is going to also grow quite nicely. It's going to grow in a really. I'm going to try and get it to grow in as natural a way as I possibly can. Not the Transport Fever 2 way, but it does mean I'm going to have to sit around placing a lot of roads and maybe demolishing some roads. There are some roads in some places here that I'm looking at and I'm thinking, no, that just does not look quite right. But again, these will be bits I do off camera, because there are far more important things to do on camera. 2 to go, and we start with Maryport. Now, Maryport is, yes, it's near water, but it is an inland lake. It's not a port, even though Maryport does have a port. Maryport, by the way, is not far from Carnforth, I believe. It's all in that Lancashire area. And yes, not really that impressive, the town. It needs a lot of work. The roads need a lot of work, but I have begun. And of course, by have begun, I mean that we have the goods yard up and running. And off camera, I've also gone ahead and repurposed the old goods yard, which was connected to the passenger station, to another platform. And it's really odd because one side has 2 railways going through it, 2 lines going through it. The other side has 3 lines going through it. And that is just because of the pass-through I need for the goods yard. So there is that. It was fairly easy to get it sorted on the south side. Getting it sorted on the north side, though, around this curve, that was a little difficult, and it required me reworking all the fields and pushing back a lot of the fields and reworking some of the connections, but eventually I got it done. So yes, Maryport, not much to talk about yet, apart from the goods yard, but perhaps it has a chance. This might be the single most neglected city in this particular playthrough, I think. Yes, I think this is. Oh no, wait. Shepton Mallet does exist. And finally, we get to Ollerton. Ollerton is a rapidly growing city, and I have started doing some expansion of the passenger station. On the south side, although the line is not fully connected, it is 4-tracked all the way up to the platforms. On the north side, the platforms are not connected. That is going to be a very interesting one, because I think I may not have left myself enough room, which is a problem. But I'm going to get to that problem soon enough. Ollerton in real life actually has the Sherwood Forest right near it. So perhaps I could do something with Ollerton in terms of a factory. I could put a tool factory here instead of Bridgnorth and Carnforth and that area, Carnford and that area. Chagford, not Carnford. By the way, all these things that I've just said, all these town names I've just said, they all do exist. It's just they are not in this playthrough. It's in Britain. So I could do that because we have forests nearby. We have coal mines nearby. That could be an option, possibly. And if I do that here, what would I put in over in Chagford or Bridgnorth? That is then the question. Or do I have two tools factories? That would be interesting. But yes, that is Ollerton. It's actually a very nice... I do like the curve. the curve with the trees around it. I do like that. It works really well, and the city works and is building up really, really well as well. And it has some really nice scenery in the distance with the farms and the coal mine and all of that stuff. So that is Ollerton. And that very nicely brings me to the end of this particular video. I do most certainly hope you enjoyed it and have enjoyed 200 episodes of this UK modded series where we started from nothing. This was a plain map, no fields, just basic towns, and I have gone ahead and placed pretty much everything you see. Some of the connecting roads are original, but apart from that, I would say 98% of this map has been hand placed. That includes forests, mines, almost all town roads, some of the country roads, all the fields, the rivers, all of that, apart from the main river, have all been placed by hand. only the terrain, the height map was generated for me, but even that I went through the settings and generated it specifically for what I wanted. So it has been a pretty tough thing to do, but hopefully you have all enjoyed 200 episodes. Hopefully you continue to enjoy the remaining however many episodes there are going to be, until perhaps my computer dies. So there is that. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to click on the like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel for the remaining episodes of Transports Fever 2, the UK modded series. Leave a comment in the comments box below letting me know what you think. Any suggestions you might have. A number of things still have to be done off camera, but you've seen the amount that I have already done. It just means that the remaining episodes are all about building and moving into the future. I want to get this into the 1990s, perhaps even the early 2000s, by the end of this series, which means I really do have to get a move on with the remaining factories and the remaining goods connections. That is the priority of the next few episodes. If you can do so, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, link in the description box below, as are links to my social media and Discord server. That is all from me. Thank you very much once again for all of your support, to every single one of you watching over these 200 episodes. And I'll see you next time for a continuation of Transports Fever 2, the UK modded series, where we are getting right back into goods work.